Environmentologist Dr. Tim Ball is our guest. We've got a reporter for the last 20, 30 minutes of the show joining us from Copenhagen, Denmark. He's done a lot of exclusive interviews with Lord Monckton and others. We're going to get his take on that from Denmark. We were pretty much covering this 24/7. The takeover of healthcare is part of the government power grab. And we're going to be taking your phone calls coming up here in just a few minutes, 1-800-259-9231. You were getting into the bureaucracy, evidenced by state governments, regional governments. These internationalists always get regional governments in place because they control them through international SPP meetings, North American Union meetings. They are already implementing this. And you're right, that's our big problem. And think of the arrogance of the EPA saying, Congress, if you don't let us list all these gases, we'll just do it without you. Congress should immediately start impeachment proceedings against Barack Obama.
Well, and of course, the Founding Fathers had an awareness of this in that, as you know, the U.S., unlike other countries in the world, several of your bureaucratic positions are elected officials. And so that was a degree of accountability that other countries' bureaucracies don't have. So, for example, in Canada, we don't even get to vote for the Prime Minister, let alone to vote for who's going to be the person in charge of the police departments or whatever else, the sheriffs and so on. So the Founding Fathers were aware of this. Of course, what they couldn't understand, or couldn't know, I should say, they understood an awful lot, but what they couldn't know was the extent of growth of government but also this idea about environmentalism. Because one of the things I've discovered, Alex, is that we now have all of those graduates of environmental studies programs with no scientific background whatsoever, just, feel good, touchy-feely. They're now running a lot of these bureaucracies, and they're using those bureaucracies to introduce their own personal biases and political...
And these I've met them. They are control freak persecutors. Yep. They are the new guilds to inspect our homes, our farms, our ranches, our factories, to literally rule our lives. These are all, I've met them, eugenicists who hate humanity and are burning with a dark light of control freakism.
Well, I'll tell you, give you an example in Canada here. On the west coast of Canada here, of course, we have some of the greatest salmon runs in the world. And what the Department of Fisheries started doing was that they would give a forecast in the spring of what the size of the run was going to be. And what I discovered they were doing was deliberately creating very, very low numbers. So, for example, one year they said, the run of chum salmon would be 2 million. Well, that's a very, very low number. So therefore, we're going to ban any fishing, commercial, sport, anything this year. Well, then the run would come in, and then they quietly announce, well, it was over 6 million. Well, if you were out that much in your job, you'd be fired instantly.
And let me expand. How many times has the Environmental Protection Agency in mainstream news been caught taking species, say mountain lions in one case, that aren't in an area of the country, moving them there, saying it's a new subspecies, or moving birds that aren't endangered to an area, or fish, they've been caught putting them in ponds and going, we discovered a new fish in this area. Fraud is their name. Fraud is their game. And I want you to comment on this as a scientist. It's coming out that NOAA, NASA, it's coming out the Australian, the New Zealand, the German, the British weather services are all faking numbers. Last week it came out the UN was behind the scenes coordinating all this. This is a group of fraudster control freaks. I mean, this is a criminal group.
Well, and of course, it's why Morris Strong made sure that the majority of the people at the IPCC were bureaucrats. They were the people that make up the 2,500, and very, very few scientists. And then the control, as I said, of the critical chapters in the IPCC reports was by the people at CRU. So this falsification of the official record, and one of the people doing it in the U.S., and he's been caught 2 or 3 times at it, was James Hansen at NASA. And every time that anybody dares to say anything, he immediately screams political interference.
That's right. That's right. Man with the hockey stick. All these guys have been caught over and over and over. But even if somebody's not a scientist, they say they teach children and I've seen it on the news, that the penguins are all dying and drowned. They're the best swimming bird there is. They teach everybody, literally, the best swimming bird there is a different species of penguin. The first best is one type, second best swimmer is another penguin. I think I was reading the 9 most rated best swimming birds are all penguins. They say the polar bears are all dying, their numbers are exploding. They say they can't swim. These people are just total fraudsters, and they know they're in fraud.
Well, and one of the things with the polar bears, and I flew search and rescue in the Arctic for 5 years, and I've seen polar bears 100 miles offshore. They're superb swimmers, Alex, because the long fur is hollow to allow the sunlight to hit it and go in and heat their bodies.
It's incredible.
And therefore, with that hollow fur, I want your viewer or your people to watch next time you see a video. You'll see that fur floating up all around the polar bear. That keeps them afloat. They just paddle away. And then there's stories about polar bears eating their young. Well, the male polar bear, that's a common practice amongst the male polar bear, is to eat.
So does the grizzly, so does the lion,
well, exactly.
So does the tiger, so does the wolf. They go and kill the males so they won't be threatened for supremacy.
Exactly. And yet these stories come out in completely distorted ways. But, of course, this is the game. It's the emotional game. It's the emotional game of extinction. And notice that they always use what I call anthropomorphic animals. They've got to have the big round eyes. They've got to look cuddly, like the panda and the little polar bears and the seals and so on. And by the way, they killed some of these animals with kindness. When I was flying on the east coast of Canada back in the 60s, we had to patrol the seal hunt because these guys were battling with each other over the seals. I watched Greenpeace go in and spray the little white seals with green paint to make the fur unattractive and unusable for the seal hunters. But what they didn't realize was that, of course, the killer whales were coming up underneath, could spot the seal now because it was nicely marked for them. And I've actually watched it from the air where they'd come up and bump the seal up into the air and then catch it in their mouths as it came down. It also attracted the seagulls, which would sit on the baby seal, now identified for them because they're white for camouflage, and peck their eyes out and kill them that way. So these people are they're just so outrageous that they're doing far, far more.
And of course, Greenpeace, as their own founder admits, that's they get some cult members that really believe in all this, but that's all just PR stunts when they're out there. They don't care if those seals die. They love it.
Well, Patrick Moore, of course, the co-founder of Greenpeace, and I've been on platforms with him, and he told me, he said, within 5 years, the Marxists had moved over and taken over the operation. He's quite blunt about that, and he said, so I just quit. I got to.
But again, the Marxists work for the bankers. They turn them loose as a scourge to take over the government, just like the UN just went, oh no, the private banks are taking over the UN. In fact, let's talk to somebody who disagrees with us. Let's talk to John in Ohio. John, go ahead.
Yes, I consider myself a non-member of any organization and an unaffiliated person who has read Marx and Engels and Lenin, and I can't believe that you would. I agree totally with exactly what you're saying about the phoniness of the man-made global warming. I agree, but at the same time, the kinds of people that that reveal themselves as neocons. Unfortunately, Lord Monckton says incredibly important things, but then calls it communist, calls it communism. This is a kind of a way of discrediting all the good things he's saying by putting it into the nutty 50s Birchite McCarthyist type of.
Hey, listen, buddy. Hey, stop just a minute, John. Look, I can't play these games with you. Almost all of Obama's administration wrote books calling themselves communist or socialist. Now, you just don't get it. You don't understand that the big banks have always funded collectivists to fool the people, just like they fool the third world at the UN into thinking they're going to get to loot America, and at the last minute they bait and switch them. You build any command and control architecture, it's going to be used by the most powerful to extract wealth and power. Okay? So we've been right about everything. We understand the political paradigm. I go past the left-right paradigm. Sure, I'll have a Lord Monckton on or something who's fighting it from a conservative perspective. More power to him. You know, this is not like a church or something where you've got to say the right's perfectly right here on air or you're not part of the church of Alex Jones. John. Comments to what John is saying, Dr. Ball.
Yeah, well, I'd like to comment in that, yes, if you take the pure theory of Marxism and Engels and so on, and I've read all of that as well, John, there's some logic in it. The illogic is, of course, in that you have total government control, and therefore individualism is stamped out. And from a evolutionary point of view, it's that individualism that advances society, and that's certainly true in the
US. The state never withers away. It only gets bigger.